Platinum Games is pretty well known in the Nintendo community, mostly because of Bayonetta. The company makes artistic and fast-paced action games, so anything from them coming to the Switch is something to look forward to. In fact, we've got Bayonetta 3 that's going to release here in just about a week. But we aren't talking about that sexy demon summoning witch today. We're going into a different quality console to handheld port showing off one of the developer's most ambitious games to date, the open world Square Enix published game in the NieR franchise. Here is my review of NieR Automata, the End of Yorha edition for the Nintendo Switch. In the world of NieR Automata, mankind was invaded by aliens that unleashed an army of machines to take over planet Earth hundreds of years ago. What humans remained fled to the moon as androids were sent to take back the planet. You play as 2B, an android sent by a special military force to help fight back against the machine army. You follow 2B along with her partner 9S on a journey of learning, realizing that what they think they know about the machines may not be true anymore. Now, overall, I found the story to be pretty fun. It's definitely an anime-esque type of storyline with the ongoing changes in character of the 2B and 9S dynamic, along with what happens with the quote-unquote truth about the aliens and the machines. And the further you get, the more over the top the story gets in subsequent playthroughs. Also, do you need to play the original NieR or its remake NieR Replicant for Automata? Not really. There are small references to the older games, especially in the later playthroughs, but the inciting incident with the aliens happened thousands of years after the events of the original, making this a pretty separated thing. When it comes to gameplay, NieR Automata is an open-world action RPG with lots of action and shooting elements thrown into the mix. As you trek through the game, you'll explore a large open world, do side quests for NPC, jump around huge environments, and do lots of machine killing. Now, first of all, the End of Yorha edition on Switch is basically the same as the other all DLC built-in editions on Xbox and PlayStation. It's got the base game, previously released post-game content, along with a few new costumes exclusive to the Switch version. As far as progression goes, Automata is open world. Once you get through the first mission and gain access to the main area, you'll be put in this big explorable set of city and landmark ruins on planet Earth. You'll have the Resistance Space as a kind of hub to talk to NPCs and shop for items and upgrades, and all of these different places you can unlock and seamlessly go to as you progress the story. Going to where you need to go is a matter of waypoints. Your next story objective will always be marked on your map, and it's your job to figure out how to get there. The game will tell you general locations to go, but at times you have a bunch of different paths in the area before, so you gotta look at the map and figure out which path is correct. With actually maneuvering this area, you've got a lot of platforming and maneuvering around to do. While you can't break everything like you can in Metal Gear Rising, you can climb around on a lot of interesting things like broken up skyscrapers, highway overpasses, and even giant machines you take down earlier on in the story. And all of this environment exploration and jumping around is cool, but the real uniqueness of Automata comes with its combat system. Someone asked me last week what kind of game this is, and I had a hard time finding a straight answer. It's a 3D hack and slash game with shooting elements where you can slash around and dodge with different combinations of swords you can acquire and upgrade, while also using a pod that follows you around to shoot out projectiles and big special energy attacks like laser beams and virtual hammers. And there's a lot to this combat mechanic, with being able to do perfect dodges like you're playing Bayonetta to get swift counterattacks in, and knowing what abilities to use on which enemies. But you get to a lot of different points of the game and it stops being a 3D action game. You'll seamlessly transition and suddenly you're playing a side-scrolling action game. And then you're playing a vertical top-down shooter for a while like you're playing Space Invaders. And then it'll have you in a boss fight where you go into a 3D shoot-'em-out game. So it's kind of all of these different genres mashed up into one. And that's what makes this game its own kind of thing. You go from this hard-hitting 3D action game to walking into a castle and suddenly you're playing Castlevania. I find all of this really interesting, and the fact that it transitions between modes and perspectives so seamlessly without losing any of the combat elements that you used in the other mode is impressive. The combat system itself I find to be fun, and there's a lot of weight to all of the stuff you can do, especially with melee. When you're slashing your sword around into machines, you have that really hard-hitting sound effect and movement in the game that really makes it feel like your metal sword just slashed and had to work to break through that metal. But there is an RPG side to this as well. Though I would really call this an action game with RPG elements than a fully blown action RPG. You level up from experience, which gives you a slight boost to health and attack, and enemies will be constantly scaling up in level as you go through the story, but upgrading has a much larger effect than leveling does. Your weapons can increase in power from upgrades via materials. You can buy more space in your storage for equipping chips, and they can do anything from adding HUD features to giving you stat enhancement. You can really go hard on this and make some great and interesting builds. I went crazy with the health regen chips as soon as I saw them, and got to the point where I completely abandoned buying health items every time I went to the shop, and could easily regenerate 9 to 10% of my health every second if I got hit and just dodged enemy fire for a while. The game itself is pretty difficult on boss patterns and fighting in general, but when you can regenerate that much health, once you learn how to dodge properly, it doesn't even matter. Now, I find a lot of this game to be really fun and engaging, but some of the side quests I really didn't like. Once I went through the Lost Girl escort mission that just seemed to drag on forever, I kind of veered away from side content for the rest of the game. And that brings us to content and length. NieR Automata is a decent adventure on its own, but the real adventure starts not when you begin your playthrough, but when you finish it. A single run through the main campaign can take you anywhere from 13 to 20 hours depending on how much side content you do. But New Game Plus will change the story campaign. Your first playthrough is 2B's perspective on the story, second playthrough is 9S's perspective with a lot of different events, and the third playthrough is a sequel scenario where you play as a different character and see what happens after the main campaign is over. If you do all three of these runs for the different story elements, that 20 hours can easily turn into 40. And that's not counting all the other little endings you can accidentally happen upon by going the wrong direction at the beginning of a campaign or selling your operating system at a shop. There's a lot here. Next up is presentation, and this game looks pretty darn good. Now with visuals, it does have the same pop-in issues that the big consoles dealt with, but there's a lot of detail here, from the foliage of the world to really good job on the hair textures. But the real treasure of the presentation is music. NieR Automata had some really great atmospheric and epic pieces to the soundtrack. From the ambience of just walking around the world to the chilling Become as Gods track from a certain dungeon, it's a very memorable soundtrack. Now when we get to performance, there are hiccups, but it's pretty stable overall. They opted for the Switch version to lock the 30 FPS instead of the 60 that PS4 and Xbox One struggled to reach, and we do get a smooth and constant 30 FPS for a lot of the game. Now some of the more crazy fights and cluttered parts of the open world do dip a bit, but they are very small dips. And just FYI, handheld mode actually gets fewer frame drops than docked mode. And with that, let's go into battery life, which is pretty low. On the original model, NieR Automata gets a battery range of 1 hour and 48 minutes up to 2 hours and 12. The Nintendo Switch Lite gets a range of 2 hours and 5 up to 2 hours and 36. The Redboxer V2 2019 model gets a range of 2 hours and 47 up to 3 hours and 4. And the OLED model gets a range of 3 hours and 12 up to 3 hours and 36. Now, in conclusion, NieR Automata brings its open world dystopian fight for humanity to the Switch with pretty good optimization. There are some small frame drops here and there when the fights get crazy, and I wasn't a fan of how draggy some of the side missions got, but if you enjoyed the game and want to play it on the go, it's a very impressive port. Reviews to go rates NieR Automata for the Nintendo Switch an 8.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.